Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're exploring one of the absolute most mind-bending and honestly unsettling concepts out there, the Infernal Artifact. Now, you might initially think of this as just a fun sci-fi trope, right? A strange, glowing rock on some distant alien planet. But as we're going to see, these impossible objects act as a terrifying, profound mirror of the human psyche itself. Let's step into the dark. The presence of the thing is unbearable. Worlds that fall beneath its shadow feel the heavy weight of its gaze, even though it has no eyes. It's not a relic, it's not a monument, it's certainly not a weapon. It is simply there, vast, inevitable, a black omen suspended in the dark. You see, the Infernal Artifact is not something you discover, it discovers you. Okay, let's dive into this definition because it perfectly sets the stage for us. When we look at these impossible objects, we aren't just looking at hunks of space rock or weird metal. They act as actual anchors bridging this terrifying gap between a cold, totally indifferent cosmos and the deepest, completely unmapped trenches of human consciousness. Faced with something that completely defies our terrestrial physics, human logic just breaks down. These things, they don't give us answers, they measure us. Section 1, the cosmic detritus, framing these artifacts as the ultimate other, alien garbage or sentinels that completely boggle the human mind. And this brilliantly illustrates two fundamentally different ways humans encounter the unknown, basically by looking at two absolute giants of science fiction cinema. On one side, we have Stanley Kubrick's 1968 masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey. The monolith here is the subjective, hypersymmetrical sentinel. It's an outward-looking evolutionary catalyst, triggering leaps in human intelligence. It's basically the ultimate symbol of technological optimism. But on the flip side, we have Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris from 1972. Instead of a pristine block, we get a viscous, planet-girdling living ocean. Tarkovsky's vision is this inward-looking, psychological critique. Everything is covered in dirt and decay, and the ocean itself acts as a psychic mirror, literally materializing the repressed guilt and unresolved grief of the scientists. Kubrick looks out and sees technological evolution. Tarkovsky looks out and sees the terrifying, messy depths of the human mind staring right back. Think of this like an intelligence-style briefing on impossible objects. We've talked about the monolith triggering intelligence and the living ocean manifesting guilt. But consider the golden sphere from Roadside Picnic. This is extraterrestrial debris acting as a reality-distorting wish machine, granting what your subconscious actually desires. Then you have the shining trapezohedron from H.P. Lovecraft's The Haunter of the Dark. This asymmetrical black polyhedron serves as an extra-dimensional focal point. It isn't just scary, it operates as a catalyst for pure cosmic fear, that paralyzing realization of humanity's total insignificance. In every single case across these stories, the physical form of the artifact maps directly onto a profound psychological shock. Section 2, Sigils and Sovereign Objects. Shifting from the vastness of deep space into esoteric traditions that treat artifacts as gateways to hidden forces. Which brings us to a really fascinating figure from the turn of the 20th century, the English artist and occultist Austin Osman Spare. Spare totally rejected the theatrical, super elaborate rituals of traditional magic. Instead, he stripped the whole shebang back to create a highly psychological system called the Zozkia cultus. His entire goal was to unite Zoz, which is the fleshly body and mind, with Kia, the primal void or the wellspring of all existence. Think of Zoz as the hardware of your body and mind, and Kia as the infinite, formless operating system of the universe. And get this, he didn't connect them with fancy wands or robes. He did it by creating what he called sentient symbols to directly access the primal void. Spare's primary tool was the sigil, and the mechanics behind it are actually incredibly specific. First, you write out a specific desire as a concise sentence. Second, you systematically delete all the repeating letters to completely obscure its rational meaning. Third, you graphically combine whatever letters are left into a single, abstract geometric glyph. And step 4 is where it gets really wild. You must consciously forget the desire and physically destroy the drawing. So much for keeping a scrapbook, right? It's literally a fire and forget mechanism designed specifically to completely bypass the conscious ego, which is usually bogged down with doubts and anxieties. You forcefully pack the intent deep into the subconscious, letting the mind act on it completely autonomously. Section 3, Egregores and Group Minds. Let's move to and see how this builds from individual esoteric practices to the terrifying power of collective thought forms. So, what happens when it's not just one person focusing on a single, but an entire group of people? Well, you get an egregore. Etymologically, this actually comes from the Greek word egregoros, which means watcher. In Western esoteric traditions, an egregore is basically a collective group mind, or a non-physical thought form. When a group of people continuously focuses on a shared symbol, a dogma, or a ritual, that accumulated mental energy is said to actually develop into a semi-stable astral body. It achieves a bizarre kind of distributed, non-human sentience that is sustained entirely by the collective focus of the group. Tracing the history of the egregore is quite a trip. Victor Hugo first used the term in an 1859 poem, and soon after, the occultist Eliphas Levi linked them to the biblical watchers, those angelic beings that intermingled with humanity. But fast forward to the 1920s, and things take a much, much darker turn. There was this highly secretive Italian esoteric faction called the Group, led by the philosopher Julius Evola. They allegedly performed rituals specifically to revive the ancient, militaristic egregore of Imperial Rome. They wanted to physically manifest this thought form to aid Benito Mussolini. According to the historical accounts, during the 1922 March on Rome, a mysterious figure dressed in red stepped forward and handed Mussolini a physical phasis, supposedly transposing an ancient symbol right into a modern totalitarian egregore. Later, by 1987, writers like Gaetan Delaforge were defining the egregore purely as a psychological group mind. But as you can probably guess, not everyone thinks egregores are a harmless or positive thing. The esotericist Valentin Tomberg, in his anonymously published book Meditations on the Tarot, provided a really chilling warning. He literally called egregores demons engendered by the collective will and imagination of nations. He viewed them as spiritual parasites. His massive warning to us is that individuals can very easily lose their personal autonomy to these artificial entities, ultimately becoming enslaved by the exact same thought forms they helped create in the first place. Section 4. Projecting the inner shadow, moving deeper into the psychological funnel to see how our minds project inner turbulence onto external objects. Let's draw a stark contrast in how we map and interact with the unconscious mind. On one hand, we have the legendary psychologist Carl Jung and his method of active imagination. Jung advocated for a conscious, bilateral, two-way dialogue with the deep psyche. The goal? To integrate our shadow selves and foster genuine wholeness. Basically, you talk to the subconscious and you listen back. Now, on the exact opposite side, look at Austin Osman Spare's sigil magic. This is a unilateral, repressive command. You package up an intent, you force it down into the subconscious, and you intentionally sever the conscious connection so the ego absolutely cannot interfere. It's basically a forceful, one-way hacking of the deep psyche, completely opposed to Jung's therapeutic, two-way dialogue. But Jung also deeply understood the power of external objects on the collective human mind. In 1958, Jung analyzed the massive worldwide boom in UFO sightings. And the interesting thing is, he didn't even care if they were physically real or not. He classified them as visionary rumors. To Jung, flying saucers were actually symbolic projections of the collective unconscious. The world was facing acute nuclear anxiety and massive geopolitical fragmentation during the Cold War. Humans basically instinctively use these external anomalies in the sky as massive global projection screens for our collective fear and our desperate hope for some kind of salvation. Section 5. The Convergence of Domains. Synthesizing how science fiction, ancient myth, and modern psychology are all describing the exact same mystery. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly these esoteric thought forms map directly onto our modern world and cultural equivalents. A sigil is personal autosuggestion, graphic compression meant to bypass the ego. An egregore is collective focus. Just think of the incredibly powerful group minds driving modern corporate cultures or massive political movements today. A mandala is a spontaneous psychological projection of wholeness, which we often see in sacred geometry. And a tulpa, a concept originally from Tibetan mysticism, is a highly concentrated mental visualization that eventually takes on a life of its own, kind of like how autonomous characters act in a writer's head. They are all artifacts of the mind, bridging our inner space and our outer reality. And honestly, there is no better example of this convergence than the Golden Sphere from the Strugatsky brothers' classic novel Roadside Picnic and Tarkovsky's film adaptation Stalker. This alien artifact perfectly, seamlessly merges sci-fi with the occult. In the story, characters navigate this insanely deadly zone of alien detritus to reach the sphere, fully believing it will grant their conscious wishes. But the twist? It acts as a living sigil. It does not grant what the conscious, rational ego asks for. Instead, much like Spare's magic, it completely bypasses the ego and manifests what the deep, terrifying subconscious actually desires. It strips away the unworthy to reveal our absolute darkest, unspoken truths. Section 6. The Presence That Measures. Bringing the thematic funnel to its ultimate, intimate conclusion. So the crucial point is this: whether we are talking about a physical monolith floating in space, a collective egregore powered by thousands of minds, an occult sigil, or even natural scientific phenomena like infrasound bending our very perception, the artifact is simply a necessary mediator. It's a cosmic mirror. These presences exist to essentially force shadow work upon us. They allow humanity to look out into the absolute darkest depths of the universe, only to find our own, completely unmapped consciousness staring right back at us. They aren't meant to be understood rationally. They are the physical, the psychological, and the biophysical interfaces for us to encounter exactly who we really are. Which leaves us with a final, really heavy question to consider today. If the Infernal Artifact stood before you right now, humming in the silence, stripping away your ego and measuring your deepest, truest desires, what hidden truth of your shadow self would its dark mirror reveal?